Hi, Steven. How are you?
Hello. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now it's better, Steven. Now it's brilliant.
Excellent.
Right.
Glad to meet you at long last. How do I say your
Exactly.
name?
My name is pronounced as Pramadi.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to check. Pamadi. Lovely. Beautiful name.
How's the weather like, Steven?
How's the weather? It's lovely. Obviously, this is a fake background, but it's actually blue skies and sunny today, so that's no bad thing going into the weekend.
Right. So thank you,
You
Steven.
can
So
message
so
me.
let's
You can
dive
message me
into
on
our
LinkedIn.
yes. So let's dive into the discussion. So let me firstly start by wishing you a very happy birthday.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm like, is it me or like, are you just getting younger or am I like eyes getting old? What's wrong?
No, I shaved.
Oh my God! You just like amazingly.
I, I look like a rabbi. I look this morning when I woke up. I looked like a rabbi or Moshe, and then I just went zoop everywhere, which I do every 3 to 4 weeks,
Okay.
and then I essentially de-age myself,
Oh
and
my
then
God!
over
It's amazing.
3 or 4 weeks I won't shave again, and then I'll look like a rabbi or Moses again, and so the cycle continues.
Very happy to see you, Steven. So let me firstly thank you for accepting my invite. I mean, for coming onto this platform and accepting my invitation. We have never met. We just synced on LinkedIn, and I am so much in adored sense because you took the time to come onto this platform, express yourself into the entrepreneurs, which is exactly what I wanted, because I wanted to find some like-minded people like myself to come onto this. So once again, thank you, Stephen, for joining with me. It means a lot to me. Stephen, let's to dive into this discussion. I'll just give you a small brief of what I am, what I have done, a little bit about me, what this is, and then we'll come back to you. So I think that'll be fair. So, Steven, I've
Excellent.
been a serial entrepreneur for nearly 13 plus years now. It's 14 plus years now since we are 14 years now because we are ending 2025. And my specialties have been in the field of medical technologies because I started a medical company from ground up. That's from the scratch board. I started it up, and then build the products, build the prototypes, build an MVP, then build the products, then started manufacturing, then went through all the loops of legislatory approvals, testing, and you name it. When it comes to a medical product, I've gone through each and every wall. And I was not the first person to be going through that wall, but there's a very famous statement where they say like first person through the wall always gets bloodier. So I mean, I've been in that field in and out, Steven. So I think that just molded me into one of the most hardcore entrepreneurs who can sustain something at a very young age. Because when I came into this, I was not very experienced. I'm especially starting a medical product in a developing country like Sri Lanka myself. Was no easy task, and especially when it comes to an entrepreneur, there's no playbook, there's no manual, and starting something all the way, and not being a software but being a physical product, manufacturing it, and then putting it into the uh, into the market per se was a nightmare in the beginning because I had to go through so much of steps, and it's not only the steps, it's also the competitors in the market, because there were giants in the market. I was like very small, very miniature. I could be crushed overnight, but I think I survived. My products were rated to be having of an accuracy of 99.9%. I mean, the product was a wearable ambulatory ECG monitor, so which is about this size. I mean, the traditional ECG was about this size big, and I was able to miniaturize to it about this size. So then I did the clinical trials, and then we did a significant number of clinical trials in the country. I worked with over 13 plus cardiologists and cardiologist to test my product, and I have reached an approval level of 99.96, saying that my
Wow.
product is very similar to that of any international standards. So that was a huge achievement. So started it, created it, commercialized it, and then I made an exit. And then right now I'm attached to an education technology company, which is a total different area. So that's a different company which we built from ground up. Myself and another dean from my university where I used to work with, we tied up together. We started that company, And then there we started manufacturing products all the way into the education space, where we wanted to revolutionize the education landscape, because it's just very, very bored. Like, you just have one-way delivery, and then we wanted to automate it, like seamlessly connect it to online lessons, so on and so forth. So that was that is the area of expertise where I came in from my second company. So that's where I'm currently based at the moment. And so while doing all of those things, I am a Stephen. I'm a very passionate entrepreneur when it comes to giving back to the community. I mean, like, I would go and talk to youngsters, talk to entrepreneurs, even when I see them on the roads, right? I just don't charge them a dime. There's absolutely nothing I want to charge them, because I really feel so much for them, because I believe that they would really value certain insights, because they are going through a whole new phase. And when they come for me for advice, I mean, there is absolutely nothing that makes me happier when if I could actually give them that lighthouse moment. That's how I call it. That is to give them some direction, saying, okay, this is not exactly what you should do, but this is something that I went through. Evaluate it very carefully. Just see if it taps into your steps, and then why don't you use it? And then they come back to me. That just gives me so much of peace of mind. And I strongly believe, Stephen, that it's high time we give back to the community, and want to. I've been meaning to do this for a very long time, so that's why I started this platform called Entrepreneur and I wanted to give back to the community, to entrepreneurs, whether it's young or matured, because sometimes, Stephen, I've often seen this. Maybe you can complement this down the discussion is, people are very scared to come and ask, Stephen. You'll be surprised how very successful entrepreneurs who are like super rich and at super levels, you'll be surprised how good they are at communicating and giving advice to young people. But we are just, the people are so afraid to go and ask to say, okay, like, he's a big top guy, what would he say? I'm like, who cares? The worst case thing is, like, he would say no, right? I mean to build that mindset, to accept that no, will take so much of courage and boldness down the line. But I am a true passionate, like, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm very hungry and very curious for knowledge, and I just want to give that back to the community. So that's why I built this platform, and I reach out to very like-minded people like yourself to see whether what we could do, what the global entrepreneurial platform is, how we can help the entrepreneurs in a global scale. So that's this entire exercise. So that is a little bit about me and why I started this. So, Stephen, on your very happy birthday, would you like to be kindly shed some light on your expertise, what you do? I know a little bit about what you do from your profile, so on and so forth, but I would love to hear it from you, from where you're based, your entrepreneurial journey, because I believe it will matter a lot to the audience and to the community. Stephen, it's all yours.
Thank you. And it's a lovely story you've told me. No, you've obviously achieved a heck of a lot in a short period of time. And actually, before I go into my story, I think these kind of video casts are useful. It's very rare for entrepreneurs to be friends with other entrepreneurs. I mean, they might meet at networking events and this, that, and the other, but actually everyone's putting on a show and everyone's trying to say we're a success. Because if you don't go to people at networking events and say we're struggling, can you work with us? No one wants to hear that. You only so everyone's putting on a front, and you can't often discuss things to do with running your own business with your friends who don't run their own business.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. They may have other stresses in their life. They don't understand this particular stress. They work for people. I call it the illusion, but they have the illusion of job security. They know they're getting paid at the end of each month. And I say it doesn't mean their lives are easy. It's just a totally different experience, and they can't relate. So I think these kind of forums or videos or podcasts are really useful, simply because a lot of what we all go through is the same.
Correct.
But it's good to validate it and go, oh, okay, they're struggling with this, or they didn't know what to do in this situation, or they had to get a loan, or they ended up with too much debt and had to reconcile. Well, I'm just making up, or all the different things that you read about. Actually, every business is essentially trotting the same journey, unless they're very, very lucky, and letting people know that's normal. that's okay. It doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean this. It's part of your journey.
Yes.
I think it's really, really important. But you'll never learn that at a business networking event, because I said at a business networking event, everyone's just putting on a show as to how successful they are and how good they are, because no one wants to start a conversation about networking by saying, "Oh, I'm really struggling at the moment."
Okay.
And we know there are lots of companies struggling. I don't know the data for Sri Lanka, but we know there are lots of companies in the UK that are distressed. We know there are lots of companies around the world that are, unless you're Amazon or Nvidia or Microsoft, you're not really making much profit. There are companies, which is why you read about companies refinancing every 9 months. Well, they're refinancing because their debt level isn't going anywhere. So that's why I like the idea of giving back as well. And one of the best ways of giving back is just to share your story, so other people can say, "Oh, okay, that happened to him as well," or and so on and so forth. So my journey is actually I'm an arty-farty person. I'm a musician and composer and producer originally. I've been doing that since I was a young teenager, and also got involved in computers and multimedia very early through my love and passion for the good old Commodore Amiga, which was a computer that was doing multimedia before anyone knew what the word multimedia was. And most of my skills are self-taught. I mean, I went to school, I did A-levels in the UK, and I have a degree. But the school system, and I think this is the same everywhere. I don't know if you ever watch any videos of the late Sir Ken Robinson, but if that's his name, I think so. The school system is outdated everywhere around the world, and the reason why it's outdated everywhere around the world is, in some cases, it's been exported by Britain via the empire, if that makes sense. But also we have these international league tables. And because we have international league tables, every country is comparing themselves to every other country on the same parameters, and these parameters are not always logical or useful for future economies, and every human is quite different, and not everyone is going to fit in that box. And so a lot of what I've learned, I'm self-taught. I had my own little first, you can call it business, but self-publishing magazine when I was around 12 or 13 about computers. And we used to contact companies for things to review and stuff like this. So I was learning those skills back then. And then I went and did a degree at Westminster University called Commercial Music, which is a mixture of production, law, sociology, all sorts of things. But the thing that, you're like this, the thing that got in my mind, first day of the course, the head of the course said to everyone, I might be changing his words slightly, but he more or less said to everyone, if you leave with the first, which is like the best degree you can get, if you leave with the first, you've essentially failed. Okay. Because you're coming into this course and you start in the music industry today. Not like other people who study something for 3 or 4 years and then when they leave, they go, what shall I do? He's like, you enter the industry today. The only difference between you and other people entering the industry is we're here to mentor you. We're here to catch you when things go wrong, and you get access to all these other facilities. But if you end up leaving after the first year because you've already got your first record deal, or maybe you're an agent and you've already got your first artist who's taken off, or whatever it may be, that's great. If you end up with the first, it means you weren't doing anything except your academic work.
Correct.
And there's no point in that. And actually, I didn't leave the course, but I did have my first business set up by the end of the second year. And that was the mindset of the place, which is very unique. Even today, most universities would not say that on day one, but that's what they said. And so I've always had a sort of a unique relationship with education. And then the business I set up was a partnership that split. And then in 2002, I opened my first recording studio, and we were doing a lot of music education, music production, remixes, producing songs, all that kind of stuff. And then the bottom dropped out of that industry. And then at the same time the industry was struggling, I got approached by someone to do voiceovers. Okay. I don't mean me as the voiceover. I just mean it was a whole bunch of tutorial videos for Microsoft for 365. Well, it was called Office then. And we said, and this is the first life lesson I guess I could share. Often when good things happen, it comes down to good people.
Yes.
And people really matter. So this guy said to me, can you do this, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, that's worth a decent amount of money. I said to him, quite honestly, because I'm always very transparent, I said to him, well, we don't do it at the moment, but we're London based, and I'm sure we could find people who speak German and French and this, that, and the other. And he said, I'll give you 2 to 3 months to find the people, build the solution. He didn't have to say that. He could have just said, no, I'll move on to the next one. Yeah. But he gave me that time, and we built it up. And before you know it, we were doing multilingual voiceovers. And then from there, we ended up hiring a video person because it was obvious the voiceovers were for videos. And we've grown and grown. And to fast forward you to where we are today, now we're around roughly 60 people in London, Czechia, a few in Greece, 1 in Serbia, small team in India, and 4 guys in Paraguay and Bolivia. And still growing. I guess we operate a lean management structure because we don't really have middle managers. We have just senior engineers, and we do everything from creation of websites, videos, e-learning courses, you name it. Digital stuff, I call it, to the localization of said content. So whether it's content we've created or content someone else created, but customers say, can you now recreate this in 8 languages or 41 languages or whatever it may be? Social media marketing, TV marketing, learning. It's essentially the company today. And also we've now launched a creative marketing section of the company, so people come to us and we'll actually put together briefs. We can obviously create the content, we can then do the media buying and whatnot. So we've really grown the company into a sort of a one-stop shop. But what makes us relatively unique is we do not have a never-ending outsourcing chain. That's something, again, if you look at business, many businesses have never-ending outsourcing chains. So what I mean by that, especially in what I call the digital world, where there isn't something physical like a factory, like what you've got or had, okay? But companies will not want to have too much fixed costs, so they'll work with other agencies to do bits of the work. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense, because we're an agency and people come to us. However, unfortunately, and especially in localization, and that's the process of making things work in lots of different languages, but in the media world as well, but especially in localization, often those agencies will outsource. And even the people they outsource to will outsource. And before you know it, the original requester has no control of the project. And essentially, 40% of the cost they're paying are just markups. And they're not actually adding any value to the product, the service. And actually, the people doing the work aren't allowed to talk to the people needing the work. And it's not structurally good for anyone. Well, it's good for the people in between, but it's not good for the people doing the work or the people requesting it. So our business model has always been to hire teams, build them organically, be honest with clients, say we can't just ramp up overnight, but if you want to work with us, we'll be delighted, and then we'll build it in an organic, sustainable way. And yeah, that's kind of my story. I'm from London. I didn't tell you that. I'm from London, born in Paddington, like Paddington Bear, a Jewish background. So, I'm not an immigrant, but I guess I'm technically, on my dad's side, I'm first generation English. And I'll say that because my dad's from Scotland. So actually, on his side, I'm first generation English. And then on my mum's side, it must be third or fourth. And my family hasn't stopped moving country every few hundred years for the last 2,000 years. So for me, the world's the oyster. The best asset I have is my creativity and imagination. And I don't have the overhang of what I call the British class system. So I believe in the fact that we can do things. And that's nice mention that, because that's what most entrepreneurs think, isn't it? That we all think we can make a difference. However, there are lots and lots of people, certainly in the UK and maybe in Sri Lanka, who have been told, either through the education system or through what I call social apparatus, like the class system, that in effect they can't make a difference. The best they can hope for is to get a good job working for someone else. Whereas my culture is to believe that we can make a difference. And we might have good days, we might have bad days, we might win it, we might lose it all, but there's nothing stopping us always having another go. And I think that tells you my story, it tells you my mindset, and hopefully allows us to feed into the discussion we're going to have.
Exactly. I think there is much to resonate in your life in compared to mine as well. I think, like you correctly said, a moment back, that is, we entrepreneurs, we go through the same thing. So I would totally agree with that, and I would echo on that points as well, Stephen. And also to touch on certain fundamentals of your discussion, that is to step into how the education system has molded this level of thinking. I strongly think that this education system, on one, I mean, like, irrespective of which part of the planet you represent, let's say you're from Southeast Asia all the way from US, UK, or somewhere in Europe, I think right now, like you correctly put, the education system is very outdated, and I don't see anybody putting an effort to reform it, or maybe the effort that they are putting themselves is not significant so that it can be visible, or there can be internal propaganda into it, so on and so forth, because the so-called Ivy Leagues want to sustain and preserve that monopoly.
Yes, I think there's a whole load. I think you're right. There's a whole load of push and pull factors. The Ivy League, or the Russell Group, they call it here, but essentially the top university structure, they have a legitimate need for the current system, because for the top academic stuff, they need a pipeline that gets the best out of people and filters people, and so they can do what they've always done. Okay, and I'm not saying there isn't a role for traditional learning or for traditional routes to, I don't know, bioscience or whatever it may be. Okay, but they also have a vested interest in keeping the supply coming, because otherwise you wouldn't need all these universities. Because
exactly. Yes.
So and then on top of that, there's parents. Parents look at their children struggling, and then they're told their children maybe have ADHD or have this or have that. And I'm not saying they don't have them, but what exacerbates the problem is being stuck in a classroom. It's not the child that's the problem, it's the environment that they're forced to do from the age of 5 to 18. And no one would stay in a job between 5 and 8 for that number of years, which they couldn't fit into, right? But we expect children to, in fact, turn up each day and stay and grind away at a workplace which clearly isn't suitable for them for many, many years, which, if you think about it, is totally illogical. But parents, though, are scared of something new because they don't want their little sonny Jim or to be the one child who hasn't had that education, even though I'm not too sure it is an education. It's a process designed to filter you through exams, but I'm not too sure what anyone's learning. And so, yes, and then hence the politicians don't do anything, because the politicians don't want to reform a system which maybe they don't get right straight away, because it's going to be a major reform.
Yes.
And then the parents will accuse them of, destroying their kids' chances. And as you say, at the top end, you've got the university saying, no, we need that constant supply so we can find the best 2%. Okay, so we've got a whole system designed around the best 2% and the fact that parents are too scared to change the system. I actually thought COVID was an opportunity, because obviously in COVID, everyone was doing remote learning. And I'm not suggesting remote learning is correct for everyone, but I thought we may have gone back to a hybrid system where actually so many times a week kids were coming to school for social interaction, because that's important, but other learning could be done online, and actually it would make things more effective and more efficient. In reality, and anyone who knows me, if any of my friends are watching this, they'll go, oh, is Stephen going on about that subject again? But if you look at the demographics, and it's not just the Western world, I mean, even India, their birth rates dropped from 6.0 to 2.0. It needs to be 2.2 to maintain the population. And it will continue to drop. We see it in China, In reality, a lot of schools are going to have to close over the next 30 years, because you can't keep all these schools open if you haven't got the kids. Even where I live, there's a school now nearby that's going to be closed. It should have 250 kids. It's got 57 in it. I think my area, which is a relatively small area compared to parts of the world, I think they cut 20 to 30,000 primary school places over the last 4 years, and we're seeing this across the country. So education, I think, may be forced to change ultimately, because the economics of it will change, which is that you can't have all these school buildings and all these teachers and all these universities being paid if you haven't got anyone to teach. So we'll end up with larger regional schools that people may go to 2 or 3 times a week with more online content, and it will be a hybrid learning type situation. That's what I would imagine. Or you may go into the building, because I guess if parents are working, they might need the kids to go out, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
But they might not be sitting in classrooms. They might be in a room having their own online learning, and then so many times a day they have some mentoring or social interaction with either a teacher or other kids, and work on projects together, whatever it may be. Also, I think, I'll stop my waffle in a minute, I think we may go backwards as well. In the 1920s, 30s, people used to go into work from like the age of 14. And one of the reasons why we extended it out to 16 and then 18, one is to teach them more, but two is to keep them out of the economic workforce, because otherwise there would have been too many people going into it for the number of jobs. Well, obviously, if there's less people being born, there'll be less people of working age. And we may have a situation where we actually go back in 30 years' time to how it used to be, and we let some people go straight into work from the age of 13 or 14. I'll tell you, my son's 14. I could hire him. He could work in my business just fine. He hates school. He legally has to go to school, but he would work in my business just fine, right? I have no issues about hiring him. I just can't. Right, so that's my views on where we are in education. But entrepreneurs aren't entrepreneurs because of the education system. With that much I can tell you.
That's totally correct, Stephen. To echo on certain vital points in the discussion, I'm like to identify the gravity of the potential. I would say the threat that is about to be faced by the society as a whole down the line is very much the fact that the younger population, as well as the kids, as well as the growing population, is coming down in numbers. And as a result, like you correctly said, the so-called academic institutes will definitely face a challenge, because there will be no one to come and accommodate them in the first place. And the challenge, like you correctly said, like COVID came out, it introduced a total different game plan. That is where they introduced something known as remote learning. I expected the aftermath, that is a post-COVID period, to have a total different impact on the society. But to my surprise, I have actually failed in the assumption that I have made, because I've seen that the world has returned to its normal state right now, and the institutes are unable to run very successfully when they don't have the so-called crowd. So when they don't have the universities filled with students, they are unable to do their marketing campaigns. They are unable to do their promotional campaigns saying, okay, we have X number of students internationally, X number of students learning X, Y, and Z, so come join us, because they needed that building to be filled like sardine packed. I just don't know how that mindset is going to build outstanding in citizens of the world. But right now, like I correctly said, like that's a whole different game plan. And since it has been in the traditional lock for very long time, I think COVID was able to create certain cracks in that entire traditional mindset, and then it was able to give certain seedlings an opportunity to come outside and then to see the world. But again, the world is as comfortable as it is prior to COVID. That is because I totally believe, like I said earlier, it's all I don't know whether it's like learner centric anymore. Whether it's economics that is actually put into the picture, because had it been a learner-centric mode, I think access to information right now is anywhere. Like we want something, like when we started university, we didn't have ChatGPT, we didn't have OpenAI, we didn't have AI models coming in. Yes, and right now the access to information is totally dependent on your imagination. So I think the younger generation should be given tasks where they can imagine beyond borders. Their navigation, their mindsets, their determination of certain projects, you name whatever the scope that they want to go into, I think they are limited by imagination. The help that needs to be brought into the picture right now is to allow the younger generation to imagine beyond the borders, because right now what stops them is the imagination alone. You think of something that you really want, Steven, believe me, you can execute it within the next 2 to 3 weeks if you really want the passion to execute it, because the world has come to that level. By the time when we were entrepreneurs, when we were building about 10-15 bags, accessing a manufacturing plant, reaching out to a source supplier was a nightmare, and we had to stay awake whole night, because not worrying whether the shipment who is coming in actually would be a deceased one or whether it would be a wrong one. And then we had to go all the way towards the clearing of content. We'll have to find suppliers. Sometimes the suppliers ghost you. The money that you put into the business is like, sometimes you put them with your eyes closed, like, and then having some I don't know, having just some unseen faith ensuring that this would happen. But it's not the case anymore. I mean, right now the world has evolved into a totally different state, and access to information and access to getting things done is just a matter of imagination. Like I said, I believe that for entrepreneurs to build up, I oftentimes come and when I address the entrepreneurs, the first thing I say is like, I would encourage you to do a 9 to 5 first, right? Because I start by saying that the reason is not to discourage them, just to give them a small hint about, because the journey that an entrepreneur faces down the line is not for the faint heart. And right now,
I see what you're saying. It's not for, but let me just give you the opposite. I've often said to people, because obviously one leans on their own experiences, and I've always been self-employed, except when I was 16 and had a holiday job, is it's easier to set up your own business when you are young, when you haven't got a family, when you haven't got a mortgage, because A, you got nothing to lose. You got no assets. And 2, you don't have that responsibility and extra stress. Whereas if you start doing 9 to 5 and progress and do well, you may be in a place where you always wished you had gone by yourself and done your own thing, but you're too comfortable to make the leap, because then you're risking. Because by that point, A, you've already got a salary, and by then you've probably got your mortgage and you've got your family. Even though no one's having kids, so you might not have a family, so that's okay. But the point is, it may be harder to make that decision. Obviously, you'll learn things if you get a regular job. You'll learn how not to run a business, probably, if you see what the people around you are doing, or you'll like, I say, I like that, and you'll learn you'll learn the best, what's good and bad. And you may also build contacts and networks so you can then leverage in your own thing. So I'm not saying what is the right or the wrong way, but certainly there's benefits to both and there's downsides to both being either get a regular job first and then become an entrepreneur, or just go for it and become an entrepreneur. Okay, I think it swings and roundabouts. But I will say something about learning, imparting knowledge. As you say, we can find information very easily nowadays. And going back to one of the problems with the education system is it's still Victorian. I mean, the Victorian education system, whether it be schools or universities, is about putting as many bodies as you can within a room, someone standing at the front of the room and talking at them, imparting information, because that information isn't easily, there's no internet, it's only in books, and the person at the front has read all the books for you already, so they're doing the talking and they're essentially giving you the learning points you need. Sure, you might go and find out those books yourself in your own time, but the person at the front of the room is essentially introducing the subject and giving you the basics, and then you'll go and do further study alongside it. We don't need that anymore. We literally don't need to cram into a room and have that one person tell us their interpretation of the thing. We've got YouTube, we've got e-learning, we've got so many things. So I see a future of learning where people do self-learning, but then they go into schools or colleges for mentoring, for feedback, for have you thought of this, for challenging, for being challenged. But not just to sit there and be spoken to. Because, I know one guy, but I was talking to someone, his son is thinking of leaving university simply because he's fed up turning to lectures where the lecturer's just standing there for 2 hours doing a PowerPoint. And it's like, really? I could have, am I paying 10 grand a year plus living costs? to watch people give me PowerPoints. I mean, this could all be done. I could learn this stuff elsewhere, or it could all be synthesized much quicker. But that's the system we have. So the big issue is, if you want to create more entrepreneurs, but that is the education system, and it's not going to, I mean, I think we're both right. The demographic changes are going to force it to change, but it'll be changed because it's forced to, not because anyone wants to. So in the here and now, where that is the system, how do we grow more entrepreneurs? How do we do it? It's very, very difficult. And I think part of it's also cultural. I mean, let me ask you, because I don't pretend to be an expert in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, I mean, is there an entrepreneurial culture? Do people feel, yes, I can go and do this? Or is there a class-based system, and people who may have great ideas, but in their head they're like, well, that's not what I'm meant to do? So yeah, educate me about the culture there.
So Stephen, I've been in this entrepreneurial space, like you said, for a very long time, and to be honest, it has evolved. Right now we have incubators here in Sri Lanka, and then we have co-working spaces, and then we have certain entities where they are trying to raise funds and then to help these entrepreneurs to build up certain ecosystems, so on and so forth. To be very honest, if you ask me whether there is progress, yes, I strongly believe that there's progress. But the barrier that I'm trying to break with this entire effort, even using building something like Entrepreneur X, is I see that most innovators in the country, as well as the entrepreneurs in the country, are so localized that and that their vision is restricted all the way towards a country alone. The fact that they are looking at the globe and looking at the potential that they can reach out is very limited. And as a result, one major restriction that they're facing, that thinking mindset, is simply because unavailability of funding, unavailability of a platform for them to meet international players, to look at where the world looks like. Because now, to be very honest, if you are to be like if you are an entrepreneur who's supposed to be, let's say at this particular moment, to be building a startup in, let's say, in Silicon Valley or UAE, for that instance, I mean, the access to investors, the access to platforms where they could come and continuously go and pitch their product, get the feedback, bring in investors, bring in like-minded people, is very much higher, Stephen, because the reason is access to capital and access to a social economic standard which is very focused on giving power to innovation is not the ecosystem in Southeast, not just my country. It has not been the ecosystem in the entrepreneurial space in the Asian and South Asian region very comfortable for the past 20 years. I can guarantee you that. I mean, the world is not going there. I honestly don't know why we don't have a springboard where we have entrepreneurs maybe come and just pitch products, and then somebody come building up a company, let's say in Silicon Valley or in US, and then taking up that product and let's say lobbying on behalf of them and trying to raise funds cross border, and then bring that funds all the way to Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is a beautiful place to come and work with. It's not very expensive for entrepreneurs to work with, but someone outside the country can actually raise the funds, and you could bring those funds and have those people work here, because that will be very cost effective. Because rather than having the entrepreneurial team going and working all the way in US, you could have a team specifically in US who is raising funds, right? Because they will have the novel ideas, they will go to the investors, they will go to the respective parties, they will pitch the products, they will take the pluses, they will take the minuses, build companies X, Y, and Z. You just need that facility to happen. I mean, it hasn't happened. This entire effort, why I wanted to put this Entrepreneur X onto the map, is just to have like-minded people like yourself come in, pitch your stories, and then to share the stories among the crowd of this entire Asian and South Asian region to see, okay, you can do this. There are people in the world who are doing it. Worked in this space for very long, and I can comfortably and guarantee and tell you that there is no such ecosystem built. So as a result, the entrepreneurs are oftentimes discouraged to come and pursue this entire dream of entrepreneurship, because that has been a nightmare. I mean, this is not the case in Sri Lanka alone. I've been in Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, And then I've been in the remotest parts of Philippines, coming and building up entrepreneurs. Been in Nepal myself, and then I've been looking at ecosystems in and out of these things. I mean, this has been the platform for very comfortably for 20 plus years, and I don't see the entire structures going to see or embrace any change. One major reason I like to, I mean, why I predict that it would remain the same is simply because I think it's an economical norm that is it's very easier for upcoming economies to have low and growing economies in the world, because it's very easier for them to let's say use these low income generating economies as workforce alone rather than being entrepreneurs, because it's going to help them grow in certain X and Y and factor.
Well,
yeah,
we see that with the Philippines. I see, because I talk to some, whenever I talk to people involved in business in the Philippines, I think they're incredibly creative. I think they're full of energy, but they're all virtual agents, and virtual agents are getting paid very little. Normally there's Western companies that are middlemen sitting in between, making a margin for delivering very little. And I often think, why aren't these virtual agents just running their own businesses? Because in effect, Western companies are using them to run their businesses. So and it's because, I think you're right, there's no, well, the government, it certainly isn't working in such a way to bring in
I mean, the government, it's, I think, as entrepreneurs, Stephen, relying on the governments to execute these things, to be very honest, I mean, I had that mindset about a while back, let's say about very comfortable or 6-7 years back. I thought that the governments are actually responsible for this, and then I realized it's not the government's take, Stephen, anymore. I mean, somebody outside will definitely have to take it, because whatever the government that comes into power, irrespective of whatever the political parties that come into power, I mean, like, they have so much in their agenda rather than focusing on this, because I see this to be one of the most vital threats that is going to be, because right now we look at outsourcing, we look at bringing in talent outside the outside worlds just to get the things done. What we are promoting is e-slavery, electronic slavery. That's exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, like, the world is so full of it, and they just see it right in front of their eyes, and they are very comfortable ignoring it. And as a result, what happens is the Asian and the South Asian markets are just the workforce for the West to innovate. And what will happen is, I'm just looking at this in a very bigger picture. Let's say for one reason, let's say for one instance, if the West as well as the Europe, UK and other countries stops innovating, stops on a day that they stop innovating, the entire workforce that is happening in the Asian, South Asian continent dies. So on that day, the economic collapse that is going to be witnessed in the Asian and South Asian markets, it's going to be through the roof. And on that day, the respective governments will decide, okay, when the dollars don't flow into their country just because they started working as a virtual assistant, getting some couple of dollars, $300, $400 in their pockets, when that also doesn't come into the economy, then they will realize, okay, something has to happen. I think then it's too late for entire economies to collapse. And that is actually what scares me. Because right now the talent in Asia, like you correctly said, the talent in Asia and South Asian markets are fantastic. I've been to Pakistan. I've been having discussions with the young entrepreneurs. If you look at the innovation that they bring up from the ground level, Stephen, simply miraculous, because they have teams going and outreaching into the most rural parts of their entire country, matching, integrating them with the country's central health technology incubators, and providing assistance to places that you never thought was possible. I mean, they come up with so much of innovativeness. So then I had a chat with them, and I just helped them to come and navigate them, and then to introduce certain investors into them. I was surprised. I was surprised in the first place on the lethargicness of the local investors in the country alone. So then I was able to bridge them with some of the investors who I used to consult in Australia, and then I brought their attention. They were able to raise funds very comfortably north of 1.5 million to 2 million Australian dollars. They were able to raise it, and then right now they are doing amazingly well. So that is just one instance. So my question always is the South Asian market, the Asian market always good as far as the labor is concerned. Is that the case? I mean, I have seen talent who is capable of upbringing certain things that would definitely benefit not only the West but also to the world, right? So why isn't that platform already built? Like, is it?
Well, I think some of it. I use the word cultural. I know that some people don't like that word or think it has other connotations, but I think there's a mixture of governmental and cultural combinations. So in other words, you clearly do need some people who have been successful entrepreneurs who are patriotic nationalists. Okay, I don't mean extreme. I just mean, they're proud of the country.
The passion to give back, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, proud of but they will need to go either use their own funds or talk to other investment groups around the world and say, I want to create a Sri Lankan investment group, but the idea is we only invest in Sri Lankan companies and they've got to keep 40% of the staff in Sri Lanka for at least the first 10 years, blah, blah, blah. And then be able to prove those other investors what the global return will be. And then obviously have the skill to pick the right services. Because if you start doing that, guess what? You then end up with a critical mass over a period of time of entrepreneurs. And what happens, just like you have, is, let's say you're running the investment fund and you invest in 10 companies and 3 of them fail, but the other ones all do really well. Probably the people who do well will exit. But guess what? They'll then create new ones, also in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
But ones they exited don't leave. They're still busy doing what they were doing.
Yes.
Or junior staff that were in there go, well, I've done it with this guy, I'm now wanting to do it myself. And, Nvidia there and Microsoft are there, and for them, culturally, setting up businesses is just what they do, right?
Yes.
But doing it is the cultural part, but having the investment funds is the organized part, and someone has to take the lead there, whether it be some rich Sri Lankans or rich people from the Philippines, along with government. Now, I often get told government in some South Asian countries is dysfunctional and corrupt, so they're not going to get it all together. And then you also need, as I say, some very successful people who have already done it, who are prepared to build this infrastructure and encourage the culture. But it needs all these things to come together, and it only happens if there is a sense of national cohesion and national mission, that we are a people and we want to succeed and this is how we do it. And that you can't program. That is actually, you either, being honest, in the UK, I don't know how you perceive the UK living outside of the UK, but the UK is not a particularly patriotic place. It used to be, but in modern times, it's a place that is in many ways very welcoming, I think, still, but it doesn't have a clear sense of identity, and hence it doesn't have a clear sense of purpose. And people are not always pulling together in that way. So here people invest in property, they invest in financial services, and yes, they'll invest in, going back to what we talked about in education, they'll invest in Cambridge and Oxford and biopharma, because they'll invest in almost like the 2% again, yeah? But there isn't actually a really good, what I call deep culture of investing in brand new technologies or brand new business ideas. Okay, traditional banks don't really want to get involved. One thing we have had over the last 10, 15 years is an increase in what I call non-bank lending. Okay. So we have companies, a main funding circle, and a whole bunch of them that offer loans, and you don't have to do, a 3-month application process. And you could often get money within anywhere between 48 hours and 2 weeks.
Right. Are you referring to risk capital, or do they use any collateral in that ecosystem?
It's normally done against a personal guarantee. Okay. Obviously, if you own a building or something, they'll definitely use that. But if you're just, if you don't have any assets, it'll be personal guarantee. Obviously, the interest rates are generally much higher than the traditional banks will give.
Correct, because the risk is higher, right? Yeah.
Yes, the risk is higher. But nonetheless, this has allowed a lot of businesses to either stay in business if they've been distressed, or grow. without the traditional barriers to growth. Because again, traditionally, banks in the UK, I think, are not, they'll happily invest in, I don't know, a property business because they see something tangible, but culturally, they're not good at investing in the creative industries, as in music, film, and all that kind of stuff, or tech ideas. Right? Then they're just not. Obviously, we do have angels and other funds here in the UK, but again, even they suffer from what I call the British culture, which is, prove to me it will work. And it's like, well, you just have to, at some point, you have to, take a risk. Whereas they look at financial services and property as not risky. Clearly, in America, people are more prepared to take a risk. Otherwise, you wouldn't have your Facebooks.
Yes, exactly. Like you very correctly said, Stephen, I've had multiple investors as well as resource persons from US joining onto this podcast. And what they themselves, what they are very comfortable is the access to risk capital. That's how they word it. They say access to risk capital is very comfortable in US. And I've had a very I would say a very senior serial entrepreneur who is currently based in Belgium at the moment, but was in US. He recommended that even Belgians to go and create their entire startups in US because access to risk capital and the fact that the ecosystem is so friendly to put some money, not generally on the business, but also by looking at the potential of the person, is very high when you look at US. I mean,
and that's cultural. That's what I mean by culture. That's cultural. That part is very hard to recreate. You can't just say, well, we need to be like them. I mean, you might say we need to be like them, but you can't just say it and it happens. And also, how do you become like them isn't easy. I mean, we're all humans. We've all got the same strengths and weaknesses. I don't want to go into some kind of that group of people are different or better than that group. But you can't easily unprogram thousands of years of culture. And as I say, the British have a class system. That much is clear. And even though I'm British, clearly, as I said, I'm Jewish. I am of immigrant background, so I haven't inherited any of that. So Jews came here with nothing but the clothes on their back. It never stopped them being anything, right? In fact, England went bankrupt during the Napoleonic Wars, I think, and it was Rothschilds, the famous Jewish banking family, who incidentally arrived with nothing on their back. They built their banking thing from nothing, but they bankrolled the country. So that's not to say all Jews are successful or all Americans are successful, or clearly there were poor people. But the point is, being poor doesn't psychologically stop us thinking that we can't do. Right. So how you reprogram a society to think they can make the difference, I think, is hard. Sometimes all sorts of social norms hold them back. As I say, class systems, even religion. Some religions empower people. Other religions, I think, create pecking orders, if you know what I mean, and so put people in their place. And this stuff is very, very hard. So yes, you can have investment funds, you can have programs and campaigns, but ultimately, I do think there'll always be some cultural differences which will take a long time to change. I'm not saying they can't change, just saying it will take a long time to change. But then you have to really focus on the areas you can accelerate. And then what can we do to accelerate things? And really be strategic with those. And that's where you do need government involvement. And if the governments are either busy dealing with either corrupt or just busy dealing with basics, trying to get electricity working, trying to feed people, they're not going to be focused on this other stuff because it's too out there. Even though ultimately, if they were to focus on other stuff, it may make all the day-to-day stuff improve quicker because the country gets richer, right? But it's not easy. But yeah, so America the culture, in America, going bankrupt isn't the end of the world. In fact, if you look at many successful people, they've had a number of bankruptcies.
Filing like very correct statement, Stephen. I would echo on that like multiple times because the reason is like going bankrupt, or declaring bankruptcy in US is not the end of the world for them. But if you compare it to some other place in the world, like going bankruptcy, and how the banking system and other people look at them is like totally different. It's day and night. So like means like they are done. You are done. You cannot get up. So on and so forth. But I think the lifeline still that is still available in the West. Even though you declare bankruptcy, doesn't mean your product failed. Like doesn't exactly mean that's the end of the line. Right, so there's enough and more lifelines for there where they could actually hang up and then build the system from there onwards. But still, again, you need to have a hardcore entrepreneur who is at the back of the entire stage, despite filing bankruptcy and then siding again. So that is something that has to come in the first place. But like you very correctly said, the access to lifelines as well as declaring bankruptcy is not abnormal in a country like States. They welcome it, and
yes. They welcome it more than Europe, and they welcome it more than the UK. So, the West isn't one big thing. America is way more okay with risk, and it's okay with failure. And Europe and UK is certainly less okay with risk and less okay with failure. And bankrupt is still seen, I think, as a dirty word. I mean, I've not gone bankrupt, thank goodness, but it is... I think there's a lot of businesses that are struggling, and actually it'd be better if they went bankrupt. And then the people started another business, taking the learning from that business, having been released with the shackles of the business, right? And then they're more likely to succeed. But actually, I would imagine statistically, if you were to do some research, there must be lots of people in the UK holding on to their business because they don't want it to go bankrupt, because they see it as the end of the road. And actually, it would be better for the economy and for them individually to let the business go bankrupt and then rebuild. And we'd probably have a more dynamic economy. Because essentially, think about it. I'm not an economist, so maybe someone listening will say, he's talking complete rubbish. But when we talk about economy, it's a churn-based system. In other words, trade is churn-based. By its nature, right? I want something, you want something, we trade. The moment we both stop wanting something, there is no economic activity.
Correct.
Or we both want something, but we have nothing to give each other because the things that we have is now not worth anything. There's no economic activity, right? So it's a churn-based interaction. So actually, having companies close, even though if you look at the government statistics and say, this month, 25,000 companies in the UK closed, that's a bad statistic. It's not a bad statistic if 35,000 opened, because actually,
yes,
25,000 businesses may have been doing very little economic activity, but were actually holding people back. And the people who worked in those businesses, once they would get rid of the businesses, they can start churning again and creating productivity and new economic activity. That kind of cycle where, okay, this isn't working, so instead of just trying to make it work and trying to make it work and trying to make it work, I'm going to close it. But I'll take all the ideas that I learned from that and do something new next week, where I'll raise new income, investment, and we'll start over. Boom. And I think that's also something, as I said, unique to America. And the UK likes to talk like it's like that, but it's not. It really isn't. And that's one of the things that holds this country back phenomenally. And I think France and other places are even worse than the UK. They're incredibly institutional. So they really struggle. Which is why you see a lot of tech companies, once they reach a certain number of staff to avoid certain taxes and other institutional things, they relocate to London.
Okay, right.
Yeah. And then when they get to a certain size, they relocate to America. So, these things all make a difference. Yeah, they
exactly. Stephen, just to get an understanding of your expertise, and then how the current AI trends has actually worked and evolved over the past, I would say very comfortable, the past 2-3 years. When it comes to the evolution of the media and content localization, how has AI influenced, and how has the workforce implementation differed when it comes to your business? Stephen would like to shed some light on that, because I'd like to see how the AI plays a role in your specific area.
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting. because obviously I guess we're in two areas, media and creative industries, and then also localization. Localization, ironically, has always been in this space, well, not always, but it's been in this space for at least the last 10, 15 years with machine translation, because actually all these language learning models started with translation, because they had to understand language, because they're language learning models. So there's been an element of that in the world of translation for many years. We find, just talking very specifically to translation for a minute, if you're dealing with what I call the main languages, English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, the machine translation is pretty good if the subject isn't too technical, and you might get between 90 and 95% accuracy. The moment you either have a technical subject or one of those, a language outside of that subset, it can suddenly drop to 85, 80%, 70% accuracy. Okay, so we're finding that AI is still best used with human review, and if you look at media production, we're actually finding it's creating new opportunities. Now, I'll be honest, it is definitely reducing the amount of work for certain people. So voiceover actors, actual physical actors, camera people, all these people, unfortunately, they still have jobs, but they are getting less days work per job. Right? But on the other hand, there might be more people creating content than ever before, because a bit like the desktop publishing revolution, more people can now get into the industry, if that makes sense, and create content. So we may find in the medium to long term, it may be certain people have less days work with X company, but more days work overall because there's more companies. Okay. And I'll give you an example. Actually, I was talking to my daughter about this today because she's studying film production in Leeds, and she loves script writing and wants to be a script writer, director. But recently, she did a project and she did all the set design, right? So props, painting, she did the whole lot, and she really enjoyed it. She said, "This is a bit of the industry I'm really interested in," and I said, "That's great, but here's what's happening: is actually." For some things, they may only film the set for one day. They may create the set, film it, take lots of photos of it, but then collapse the set. And then you use that set and those images that look real, because they are real, but then fuse them with AI footage to make the story, whatever the story is. Okay, so instead of 30 days shooting, maybe you'll be limited to 5 days shooting, which means if your job is just the lighting person or just the cameraman or just the set person, you might be needed, but you won't be needed for 30 days. Okay, so it becomes harder for you to earn a living. However, if you're the scriptwriter and director, you might be the one, you'll essentially have more control than you've ever had before, and people might ask you to make more content than you've ever made before, because actually instead of a budget of 30 million, you only need a budget of 3 million because you're not needing all those shootings. So suddenly you can create more episodes. Another way of thinking about it is also, if it's good to have these skills, even if you're not using them every day, as long as you're prepared to sell yourself as the scriptwriter and director. And what I mean by that is, if you want to build a movie scene with AI prompts, you still need to understand set design. You still need to understand lighting. You still understand camera, because actually the AI doesn't.
Yes.
So you still need to understand it. But if you've never done it in the real world, there's no way you can prompt and correct the AI to get what you need.
Correct.
So you need to have these real world skills. However, if you specialize too much, you may find you're not getting enough work to make a living. So it's good to not specialize.
Okay.
And then you can be further up the food chain in command of the product or the service, and you get to leverage the AI to generate your income. And so that's how I see the world moving. In terms of our company, we've not fired anyone to do with AI, because what we've found is more and more companies need us. Because actually, I don't know how much you've used any of these tools, but yeah, sure, if you're going to do a 30-second funny video for Facebook, it's pretty, You don't need to be an expert. But the moment you want to do any AI dubbing or more complicated videos with multiple shots, there is no just type a button here, do a prompt here. In fact, I know like 11 Labs themselves, one of the big voiceover dubbing, they themselves have launched, I've forgotten what they've called it, but like a solutions team. Meaning, you want to use our tool, but you don't want to use our tool, we'll do the clicking for you. Because they've realized actually there's a lot of human clicking needed to get anything good out of these tools. So yes, you might save some money because you don't need voiceover actors and you don't need physical studios, but you still need maybe an army of engineers to do all the clicking because the AI is not there yet, and it won't be for a long time because they are by their nature randomization engines to stop them hallucinating. So they are probably, they roll the dice, so they don't even give you consistent results all the time. So yeah, I think it's a long-winded answer, but we see lots of opportunities. But what you do need to understand, or say you, not you personally, but what people need to understand is that AI will allow the conductor to have more control. And if you don't want to be the conductor, but you just want to specialize in one part of the orchestra, that's great. But you may find that's where you'll struggle economically.
Got it. I think that's a very, very valid statement, Stephen, to say like, I mean, the orchestra analogy is something that I often use in my discussions as well. That is like you could be an extraordinary violin player, but at some point when it's replaced and when it's reached the max, you also needs to be able to steer an entire orchestra at some point, because when you lose that, because there is high tendency for him to be replaced when he's specifically focused in that area alone. So if he has the skill to navigate, let's say, about three or four other instruments in the entire thing, he has room to play. And especially with AI coming into the picture, I think in my understanding, like you correctly echoed on certain points as well, that is, you need to have AI as a tool in your...
I think that might be applicable in very specific
areas, right, Stephen? Yeah, not necessarily in the common area, right? So,
yes, yeah. I mean, even now, if you ask a video AI to make a video of someone scratching their nose, and then you ask them to do a video of someone scratching their nose, they'll do it totally differently because the AI is a probability engine. If you ask me to scratch my nose and then ask you to do it again, I'll do it almost identically both times because I'm self-aware.
Right? Yes.
Yes, exactly. So there's a whole, and that's not exactly a creative thing; that's a non-creative thing. I don't think. I mean, there are certain jobs, and these are jobs that maybe people haven't really thought about. Take doctors and GPs, general practice, the people you go to when you're not feeling well. So they're not specialists in anything. And then you sit down and they ask you questions, and based upon your answers, maybe they listen to your stomach and they prod you, but they don't actually know what's wrong with you. What they're doing is asking you questions, and based upon your answers, they're filtering you and triaging you to the specialist because they think, well, I think maybe you've got a problem with your bottom, or I think maybe you've got a problem with that part of the body, or maybe you've got this virus, and so we'll give you this medicine. We don't know if it'll work, but try it for 7 days and come and see me, right? So it's all trial and error filtering. That will definitely be replaced by AI because they actually don't know. They don't know. They're just creating a process to try to filter it down. I tell you a funny story about GPs. Is last year, or the beginning of this year, which I guess is almost last year, my wife had a cough, and she had it for ages, and it had a unique sound. And my wife has a medical background because she's a speech therapist, and she went to see the GPs, and she went, I think I might have whooping cough. And they said, well, no one has whooping cough anymore, at least not in the UK. She went, I'm pretty sure I've got whooping cough. And they said, no, go away, come back after X amount of time. Then she went back and went, I think I've got whooping cough. And eventually, months later, 3 months later, they agreed to send her for tests. But they were like, we're pretty sure it's not whooping cough. It couldn't be whooping cough. Anyway, the test came back, and lo and behold, she had whooping cough. And then they said to her, it's funny you've got whooping cough because there's been no other reports of whooping cough in the area. And it's like, that's because you've been telling everyone they can't have it. There's been no other forms of whooping cough. Of course there's been whooping cough. You yourself, though, you're here for one job only, which is to ask questions and triage, and you have already decided that it could never be whooping cough. So your process is not particularly robust. It's a massive human failure because they've all decided it couldn't be until it was. Okay, so jobs like that, which are essentially sifting through data and then trying to work out the next steps based upon the data, I don't think humans need to necessarily do that. And I think that create huge efficiencies. But things where at some point you have to build a solution, right? How we create the new medicine, create the new surgical procedure. Even if it's a robot that's going to do the surgical procedure, at that point, humans will be involved. Now, that doesn't mean humans will be involved by themselves. As we already know, in pharmaceuticals, we are already using AI to help test and carry out, experiments and to execute hypothesis and all of this. And that's great. But it's being done with humans. And because it's the humans that are saying, well, let's look in this direction or let's look in this direction. But stuff like data, as I say, data entry and then working out next steps and pathways, that kind of work, I don't think humans will be doing 15 years from now. That's what I think.
Exactly. So Stephen, I think we had a very open discussion, and I'm extremely delighted that we were able to touch a lot of notes specifically in this area. And I would like you to specifically take in time to discuss this, despite it's your valued birthday. So so it means a lot. It means a lot to me, Stephen. Stephen, I think to wrap up this session, I would like to have a very straightforward question for you. That is, I think I specifically intend all guests to answer this question because they have very different narratives, and it's actually very important for our audience in the community. Stephen, if there is an entrepreneur who is starting, who is willing or having that entire spark stage to start an entire company and then to build this entire journey right now, what would your advice be to him? And also, just to tag along that question, if you were to be an entrepreneur, I would say in this age right now, who is starting up, what advice would you give to your younger self? I would like to have those questions married because I think that will be very, very interesting. Would you like to shed some light on that, please? Here,
I've got a number of things. But I'm going to say this, but with hindsight, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Two things. If you are offered money to borrow the maximum you can borrow, because you can never borrow enough. And if someone wants to invest, actually, I'll come back to invest. So borrow the maximum you can borrow. I was always very cautious because I saw debt as scary. And I always borrowed what I thought I just needed. And with hindsight, I should have borrowed as much as possible because I would have grown my business quicker. Now, the flip side of that is obviously for I'm saying that with hindsight, but I'm sure there's lots of people that borrow lots of money and go bust. Okay, but then again, going bankrupt isn't always the end of the world, which is what we said earlier. Okay, so if you've got an opportunity to borrow lots of money, you should borrow it, because if your business takes off, you're going to need it, and getting it once you've got problems is actually harder. Ironically, that's the way. And the same investment. If someone wants to invest, if it's a decent amount of money, don't be scared to take the investment. If they say I want 30% of the company, 40% of the company. I mean, the bottom line is your company's worth nothing when you start. So it's 40% of what? Nothing. And if their investment gets you to a point where you're earning, where the business is successful, well, you've still got 60% of something worth a lot more. Yes. And I think sometimes people are too scared to give away the company.
Control, yes.
Or even a healthy percentage. And it's like, well, if you don't need the money, don't talk to the investor. But if you need the money and it's the only way you can get it, and they're offering a decent sum of money, then it definitely don't. I'm not saying you shouldn't negotiate or stand up for yourself, but don't be scared to give up a decent percentage if it makes you fulfill your dreams. Okay, because ultimately, a company without money and worth nothing, 100% of that is pointless. So that's the other thing I would encourage. And lastly, I don't know if this is exactly answering your question, but don't think you can't. Think you can. Think you can do it. Think you can make the difference. And and seek out people to work with. Don't just sit there in a room staring at a screen going, what do I do next? We live in a world of LinkedIn, like you and me are talking to each other. We didn't know each other a month from now. But reach out to people. Some people will be it will ignore you. Some people will say, I'm not interested, go away. But just like that guy who reached out to me and said, can you do these voice recordings? And I said, no, we don't do them, but he gave me 2 or 3 months. And I remember I told you it was all about his kindness. Every so often you'll come across someone like that. And by the way, here's a nice thing. He's now my chief operating officer.
Okay.
Okay. So relationships is the key to everything. So don't be scared to build some. Don't give up if you get the door slammed in your face. Building relationships. Once you find supportive people, you hold on to them, you look after them, and you nurture those relationships.
Exactly. I think that's a very enlightening point, and I would like to echo on that last point where you said, like, not to believe in not happening, but is always to believe in something's going to happen and have that positive faith, because that's actually the lifeline of an entrepreneur, irrespective of whatever happens. Because as entrepreneurs, you should be very comfortable listening to no and listening many no's. You hear a no from this ear. I mean, like, you should be mature enough to hear a yes from the other ear. I mean, that's how I would encourage the young entrepreneurs to come on board. So that's very enlightening, Stephen. So I actually have sessions with a lot of students, and I'm actually attached to a university here in Sri Lanka, the largest private sector, where we have about 30,000 students here. So I naturally talk to them. And I look forward to maybe having you on board with another session where I can connect you to some of the youngsters, about 300-400 students, because they would love to see. I'm like, we will have a very focused discussion on your area of expertise. Like, it's on the media as well as the other localization components. I would like, because there's a lot of youngsters who are specifically focused on this model, and then on this area of expertise, who would love to hear from someone who has actually done it better. So I will definitely reach out to you, Stephen, so that we will work out the scheduling and everything. But I think I sincerely am very happy to have been connected with you. So thank you, Stephen, once again for sparing your valuable time with me. I believe the audience would actually love it. So that's actually the wrap. So Stephen, so would you like to say something about what this about this initiative on Entrepreneur X, or how you feel about it? Maybe you can share some thoughts on it. Maybe the audience would love to hear from you.
Well, I think what you're doing is really good. I think these shows are really good, and the more I want to learn more about what you're doing, actually. But what I've seen already and investigated, no, I think it's really good. And going back to what we were saying about culture, I mean, what you're doing is you're trying to change the culture, and someone has to. And so the more you can show, be a positive role model. The bottom line is, if you don't have successful people in your tribe, you'll think, well, there's no one like me. There's no one like me, so I clearly can't do that thing, right? I remember hearing a beautiful interview with the actor Edward Olmos from lots of things, but he was talking about Battlestar Galactica, and you could watch this interview. It's on the internet. But when he was, he's very proud of his Latin American roots, okay? When he was in Battlestar Galactica, a sci-fi show, supposedly another Latin American actress phoned him after the first few episodes and says, I have to tell you, my nephew was crying. He was so excited because, and the guy said, why? He says, well, essentially he was watching this show and he went, Aunt, we're going to be in the future. We were in the future, because it was the first time someone from that Latin American background had been like the commander on a big spaceship on TV. And he was like, so that boy was projecting himself and going, that could be me. And it's people who are not from certain backgrounds might think, well, what are you talking about? Because they see people like themselves all the time. Okay. But when you see, successful Sri Lankans, and you're Sri Lankan, you'll go, that could be me. When you see, if you're Jewish and you see successful Jews in TV or in business, you think, well, that could be me. And actually, in small communities, you probably know somebody who knows somebody who knows them, right? Because the community isn't that big. So that really could be me, because we're only this many people aside from it. So you need to see people, whether it be Chinese, black communities, white working class in England, the North. If you see people like you can project yourself onto them. But if you don't see them and no one says, we're here, we've been successful, then that won't happen. So I think for your program and your efforts, you'll at the very least be accomplishing that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephen. It means a lot. So hopefully let's meet again. I'll keep you posted in this entire journey. So let's catch up, Stephen. Thank you. Then bye bye. Okay, stay safe.
Have a good weekend. Okay. Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.